The psychology of people who don't want traditional jobs. There is a quiet group of people who feel something most never say out loud. They are not lazy. They are not incapable. They are not afraid of effort. Yet, the idea of a traditional job, fixed hours, rigid roles, repetitive routines, hierarchical control, creates a deep sense of resistance inside them. Not boredom, not dislike, resistance. This video is not about glorifying avoidance or rejecting responsibility. It is about understanding the psychology behind why some minds simply do not align with traditional work structures, and why forcing them often leads to burnout, anxiety, and identity loss. Because the truth is uncomfortable, the modern job system was not designed for every nervous system, every personality, or every cognitive style. From early childhood, most societies teach a single narrative about work. Go to school, get good grades, get a job, stay consistent, be productive, retire. This narrative is presented as universal truth, not as one possible structure among many. For people whose psychology aligns with structure, predictability, and external direction, this system works well. It provides safety, clarity, and identity. But for others, something feels fundamentally wrong. Not morally wrong, psychologically wrong. One of the core psychological traits shared by people who resist traditional jobs is high autonomy need. Autonomy is the need to feel self-directed, internally motivated, and in control of one's actions. Some people can tolerate external control easily. Others experience it as suffocating. When autonomy needs are high, even a well-paying or easy job can feel draining, not because of the work itself, but because of how the work is structured. Fixed schedules feel invasive. Constant supervision feels infantilizing. Rigid rules feel mentally constricting. This is not entitlement. It is nervous system mismatch. Psychologically, autonomy is deeply linked to intrinsic motivation. People who don't want traditional jobs are often deeply motivated, just not by external pressure. They work intensely when, why they choose the task, they control the pace, they understand the purpose. They see personal meaning remove autonomy, and motivation collapses. This is why many of these individuals can work obsessively on personal projects, but struggle immensely in formal employment. The issue is not effort, it is ownership. Another major factor is identity sensitivity. Traditional jobs often require role conformity. You are expected to behave professionally, suppress parts of your personality, follow social scripts, accept authority without emotional negotiation. For people with strong identity awareness, this feels like psychological self-erasure. They don't just feel bored at work, they feel less themselves. Over time, this creates internal conflict. Am I being responsible, or am I betraying myself? That question alone can drain a person emotionally. There is also a strong link between job resistance and high cognitive complexity. People who think deeply, abstractly, or systemically often struggle with repetitive, narrowly defined roles. Their minds naturally ask, why is this done this way? Why is this done this way? Could this be improved? What's the bigger picture? Traditional jobs often discourage such questioning. Follow the process, meet the quota, don't disrupt the system. For complex thinkers, this feels like mental stagnation, and stagnation feels like decay. Another misunderstood factor is emotional sensitivity. Many people who reject traditional jobs have finely tuned emotional awareness. They feel workplace politics deeply, power imbalances intensely, emotional inauthenticity. Strongly office environments often require emotional suppression. Smile when you're tired, agree when you don't, stay calm when disrespected. For emotionally sensitive individuals, this constant self-regulation leads to exhaustion, not physical exhaustion, psychological depletion. There is also the impact of early conditioning. Some people grew up in environments where work was associated with suffering. Adults were constantly stressed. Jobs consumed identity and joy. The subconscious mind learns through observation. So later, when faced with traditional employment, the nervous system reacts with avoidance, not because the person is irresponsible, but because work has been emotionally coded as danger. This is not conscious rebellion. It is protective learning. Another key element is time perception. Traditional jobs sell time for money. For some people, time is flexible. For others, time is sacred. People who resist traditional jobs often experience time as psychologically valuable, not just economically valuable. The idea of trading hours of life for tasks that feel meaningless creates existential distress. This is not dramatic. It is existential awareness. There is also a strong overlap with creative cognition. Creative minds thrive on Why novelty or autonomy, why flow, states why irregular rhythms traditional jobs prioritize. Consistency or predictability. Standardization, efficiency, these systems are not neutral. They favor certain minds. When creative individuals are forced into rigid environments, creativity doesn't disappear. It turns inward, and internalized creativity often becomes anxiety, restlessness, or depression. Many people assume that those who reject traditional jobs don't want responsibility. Psychologically, this is inaccurate. They often want different responsibility. Responsibility for outcomes, not hours, meaning, not appearances, growth, not compliance. Traditional jobs reward obedience more than ownership. For some minds, obedience feels like psychological submission. Another important factor is authority sensitivity, not defiance, sensitivity. People who resist jobs often struggle with hierarchical authority that feels arbitrary or disconnected from competence. They respect expertise. They respect expertise. They respect expertise. They respect logic. But they struggle with authority based purely on position. This creates internal friction in many workplace environments. Burnout plays a massive role. Some people once tried very hard to fit into traditional jobs. They pushed themselves. They performed. They complied. And over time, something broke. Burnout is not just exhaustion. It is loss of meaning. Once meaning collapses, returning to the same structure feels impossible. The mind associates it with emptiness. There is also neurodivergence to consider. People with ADHD, autism spectrum traits, or atypical neural wiring often find traditional jobs particularly draining, not because they lack ability, but because sensory overload, executive dysfunction, social masking, rigid schedules create constant internal strain. For these individuals, avoiding traditional jobs is not avoidance, it is self-regulation. Culturally, we confuse productivity with worth. So when someone doesn't want a traditional job, shame enters the picture. You're wasting potential. You're being unrealistic. You'll regret this. These messages compound the internal conflict. The person is already struggling with misalignment, and now they must also defend their identity. This leads to self-doubt. One of the deepest psychological wounds comes from being misunderstood. People who don't want traditional jobs are often told, "You'll grow out of it. That's just life." Everyone feels this way, but not everyone does. And invalidation increases alienation. It's important to say this clearly. Not wanting a traditional job does not mean rejecting effort, contribution, or responsibility. It often means rejecting structures that violate psychological integrity. Over time, many of these individuals develop alternative paths: freelancing, entrepreneurship, creative work, remote roles, non-linear careers, not because they are escaping work, but because they are seeking alignment. Psychologically aligned work feels different. Time passes differently. Energy sustains itself. Identity feels intact. This does not mean it's easy. It means it's coherent. However, this path is not romantic. It involves uncertainty, financial instability, social judgment, and not everyone survives it comfortably. But for many, the psychological cost of traditional jobs is higher than the risk of alternatives. There is also a philosophical layer. Some people ask deeper questions. Why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? Well, who benefits? What am I building? Traditional jobs often do not answer these questions meaningfully. For existentially aware individuals, unanswered questions become unbearable. We also need to address fear. Some people genuinely fear traditional jobs, not because they fear work, but because they fear losing themselves. Fear of becoming numb, fear of becoming trapped, fear of waking up years later, disconnected from purpose. This fear is not irrational. It is anticipatory grief. Psychologically healthy societies offer multiple paths to contribution, but many modern systems glorify only one. So those who don't fit feel defective. They are not. They are misaligned. They are misaligned. That said, resistance alone is not enough. Psychological growth requires responsibility. Understanding your mind does not remove the need to survive. People who reject traditional jobs must still develop skills, create value, manage reality. Alignment without action becomes fantasy. The healthiest path lies in self-honesty. Ask, what exactly do I resist? Structure, authority, meaning, or fear? Why am I avoiding discomfort or protecting integrity? These distinctions matter. Some people don't want traditional jobs because they associate them with trauma. Others because of cognitive wiring. Others because of values. others because of burnout. There is no single explanation. But there is one common thread, a refusal to live a life that feels psychologically false. When societies dismiss these individuals as lazy, they lose potential innovation. When individuals dismiss themselves as broken, they lose confidence. Understanding changes both sides. If you are someone who doesn't want a traditional job, the question is not, what's wrong with me? The real question is, what kind of structure allows my mind to function honestly? Not every mind thrives in the same environment. Not every life must follow the same template. Psychological health is not obedience, it is alignment, and the people who resist traditional jobs are not rejecting life. They are searching for a way to live without betraying themselves. That search is not weakness. It is awareness. And awareness, when paired with responsibility, can become something powerful. That is the psychology of people who don't want traditional jobs.